Defying the courts and doubling down, President Trump calls up California's National Guard after a judge says no. Now another showdown in Portland. Plus, 2 years since Hamas attacked Israel, and this morning, a possible turning point. And a dream turned disaster. More than 1,000 climbers trapped on Mount Everest. The desperate push this morning to reach them. The stories that matter, clear and credible, from across the country to around the world. These are your unbiased updates from Straight Arrow News. Good morning, I'm Craig Negrelli. We begin with breaking news and a major reversal overnight. A federal judge has once again blocked President Trump from sending National Guard troops into Portland, Oregon, this time stopping any state's troops under federal control. U.S. District Judge Karen Immergut, a Trump appointee, issued the sweeping order late Sunday after the administration tried to sidestep her earlier ruling by deploying hundreds of California National Guard troops instead of Oregon's. In an emergency hearing, she said the president was in, quote, direct contravention of her order and expanded the ban to block Guard deployments from any state. Video overnight shows protesters confronting law enforcement outside Portland's ICE facility, where the president insists Portland is burning to the ground. Local officials say the protests remain small and largely peaceful, confined to a single city block, not the war zone he describes. California Governor Gavin Newsom celebrated the ruling, saying in a statement, Donald Trump tried to turn our soldiers into instruments of his political will. And while our fight continues, tonight the rule of law said, hell no. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker now says Trump is ordering troops from Texas to multiple cities there, calling it Trump's invasion. The White House has not commented, but aides insist the troops are needed to protect federal agents and property. Today in Egypt, Israel and Hamas are set to take part in indirect ceasefire talks aimed at ending the war in Gaza. The meeting follows comments from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who said a long-awaited hostage release could be announced this week. Last week, Hamas signaled it would accept parts of a U.S.-backed peace proposal, one that calls for the release of all remaining hostages within 3 days, the terror group's disarmament, and the transfer of power in Gaza. Of the 48 Israeli hostages still unaccounted for, about 20 are believed to be alive. Egypt's foreign ministry says the talks will focus on a possible exchange, hostages for Palestinian prisoners held in Israel. Over the weekend, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, quote, this is the closest we've come to getting all the hostages released. President Trump also sounded optimistic, posting that, quote, very positive discussions are proceeding rapidly. Tomorrow marks 2 years since the war between Israel and Hamas began, a moment marked by hundreds in London over the weekend. In Washington, the Senate reconvenes today in yet another push to reopen the government after failing for a fourth time to break the shutdown stalemate. Democrats are standing firm on their demand to include expanded health care benefits in the funding bill, while Republicans continue pushing a short-term measure to simply keep the government open as talks drag on. Both sides spent the weekend finger-pointing. House Majority Leader Mike Johnson and Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries squared off on Meet the Press, each blaming the other for the gridlock.
They're not serious. This is not a serious negotiation. They're doing this to get political cover. The president asked Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries in the Oval Office about a week ago, please don't do this. Please keep the government open and we'll work out all these issues that we have plenty of time to work out.
Well, the last time there was a conversation with Republican leadership was in the White House meeting last Monday. And unfortunately, since that point in time, Republicans, including Donald Trump, have gone radio silent. And what we've seen is negotiation through deep fake videos, the House canceling votes, and of course, President Trump spending yesterday on the golf course. That's not responsible behavior.
Speaker Johnson says the House won't return until the Senate acts, leaving the government shutdown now stretching into its second week. This morning, California's redistricting battle is front and center as voters begin casting ballots on whether to change the state's congressional map, a move that could carry major national implications. If voters approve of the redraw, Democrats could pick up as many as 5 U.S. House seats, potentially paving the way to retake the chamber in next year's midterms. Republicans currently hold a narrow 219 to 213 edge with 3 vacancies. In California, Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1. The ballot measure is a simple yes or no vote. The issue flared after President Trump backed a redistricting push in Texas that added 5 GOP-leaning districts. In response, California Governor Gavin Newsom, one of Trump's fiercest critics, urged his state to counter with its own Democratic-friendly map. Voting runs through November 4th. The Supreme Court and President Trump are headed for a showdown. When the justices open their new term this morning, they will be weighing some of the most consequential cases of Trump's presidency, testing just how far his executive power can go. Among the biggest, whether his sweeping tariffs are legal and if the president can fire independent agency heads, including a Federal Reserve governor, at will. Also on deck, a challenge to Colorado's ban on conversion therapy, 2 cases on transgender athletes and school sports, and a Louisiana redistricting fight that could weaken voting rights protections, plus an emergency bid this week over ex-gender markers on U.S. passports. The court's 6-3 conservative majority has largely sided with Trump on emergency rulings, but this term the justices will have to use full opinions that define those powers once and for all. Finally this morning, it's the dream of so many climbers to reach the top of Mount Everest. But right now, that dream is turning into a bit of a nightmare. More than 1,000 climbers are trapped at roughly 16,000 feet after a powerful blizzard swept across the eastern slope of Everest in Tibet. Heavy snow crushed tents and buried key passageways, leaving climbers stranded in freezing conditions with little shelter. You see the line to get down right there. Rescuers remain in radio contact, but say reaching them is treacherous. At least 3 feet of snow has blocked access routes. Hundreds of emergency workers are now making the dangerous climb, trying to dig through drifts and clear a path to those still waiting higher up the mountain. I can tell you I've never been to Everest, but I've been to the top of the Sandia Mountains in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They have a tram that goes to the top, 10,300 feet. And I can tell you, once you get to the top at 10,300 feet, there's a hint of doubt in your mind that the tram is going to make it back to the base at about 6,000 feet. And until your feet are on the ground, you're, well, just a little bit shaky and full of, well, shall we say, hope. All right, before we head out, here's what we're tracking today. The Supreme Court, as we mentioned, opens its new term this morning with justices set to take up a slate of politically charged cases. At 10, House Speaker Mike Johnson is scheduled to hold a press conference on the government shutdown. At 1, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt holds a briefing. And later today in Utah, the legislature votes on new congressional maps after a court ordered them to be redrawn. No spin, no drama, just the news you need. Sign up for our newsletter, delivered straight to your inbox each morning. Go to san.com/newsletters. Those are your Unbiased Updates for this Monday. We'll see you back here tomorrow. For all of us at Straight Arrow News, I'm Craig DeGrelli. Have a great day.